Hello and welcome to Art with Miss Joyce. Today I will be showing you how to make an artwork inspired by Piet Mondrian. So this lesson focuses on Piet Mondrian and abstract art. For this project, students will need paper, paintbrush, the primary colors, and black. So this paper is 9 by 12, and I think this size is pretty good for students. For this project, you are first going to have students make a grid with black paint. So students will take the black paint and you can have them choose where on the paper they would like to start. So I'm going to start in the middle here, and I'm just going to make a straight line going across. Now you want this black line to be pretty solid, so try to get it as solid as possible by going over it a few times, but of course it may be a little difficult, so just have them take their time. So once we have that first line, we're going to get more black paint and choose another spot on the page that we would like a line to go from this black one up to the edge of the paper. So I'm going to start here. I'm going to take the paint and just bring it all the way up. And then I'm going to go over this to kind of fill in that line a bit more. So we're just going to repeat that process of choosing somewhere along one of the black lines and just going straight to the edge of the paper. Now, since Piet Mondrian was an abstract artist, we want to encourage students to not make an obvious image of something. Piet Mondrian's artwork is also known for looking like a grid. So we want to create a grid with the black lines and having squares. A lot of his artwork depicts squares or like rectangles. So during this, I would talk about Piet Mondrian and how when he first started painting, he was making landscapes, and then he moved to abstract art. As he was painting his landscapes, he started to look at those landscapes and try to see what basic shapes he saw. So I think this would be a good time to kind of ask students or tell them about how with drawing you do kind of just first look at the basic shapes of an image or object, and you kind of sketch that out first. So maybe you could have some images and just see what basic shapes they see in that image. We would of course talk about abstract art and say that abstract art is art that doesn't really depict a clear subject. Once you're done with the grid, I would like students to have at least 10 different shapes. Of course, they can have more than that, but I wouldn't say any less than 10 shapes if you're using a 9 by 12 piece of paper. I think that kind of leaves the shapes to be fairly big and easy to work with, and they don't get too small. So I would then show mine and be like, okay, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I have 10 exactly. Of course, if you want to go with more, that is completely fine. It is up to you. This would probably be day 1 of the project. You could finish the day with, okay, we've created our grid, we're gonna let it dry before we move on to part 2. So part 2 or day 2 of the project would then be filling in these shapes. So for this, I would talk about how Piet Mondrian used the primary colors and go over the primary colors as being yellow, blue, and red. And then on their palettes, I would only give them the primary colors and tell them to not mix them. We are only focusing on and learning about the primary colors. So no mixing of these three, because the project focuses on primary colors, but also Piet Mondrian used the primary colors in his artworks. I would have them choose one of the colors to start with. So I think I'm gonna start with this yellow. And then I'm going to choose a square on my grid and fill it in. And you're gonna want to tell them to be careful when they are filling in the space to not go over the black too much. Of course, it can be a little bit difficult with their age. They might not have the motor skills. So now we've got one square filled in. And for this project, I want students to use each primary color at least once. So I would encourage them to, after they finish that first space, go to a different color, clean off their brush, choose another color, and choose another space on their grid to paint in. So I'm going in with blue and just filling in this space here. And then once this blue space is filled in, of course, the last color that I need to use is red. So maybe you have each student start with yellow and choose one space, and then once they fill in that space, we all go and move on to blue and fill in the next space, where of course they can choose what space they want to fill in, but it is up to them. So of course students can choose whatever space they want, but we're all using the same color at the same time until we go through all three colors. So now I have to use red at least once. So I'm gonna go and fill in this square here. So now I have 3 of my spaces filled in, 1 with each primary color. Now of the 10 spaces that I have, I would like to see students fill in at least 7 of their spaces. And then the other 3, if they did 10, can be left blank. And I'm going to continue to fill in the squares. And at this point, students don't need to use each color. So, I mean, if they really want, they could do, after they have the 3 colors, they could just use all blue and fill in the rest of the squares blue. Or they could just use red and blue and not use any more yellow. This allows students some choice in the project where we're all creating like something similar, you know, an artwork inspired by Piet Mondrian, but each artwork is going to be different and a little unique to each student. We're trying to get them to express themselves and develop their skills of like staying in the line and learning what the primary colors are. So I would stress that do not mix the colors. I think it can be very tempting for students to want to mix the colors when they have them all right there, but really this is not the goal of the project. We will be mixing colors with the different projects. I have my 7 spaces filled in. I think it is looking pretty good so far. I've met all of the requirements. So now anything else that I would want to do would just be up to me. So then my painting is done. So maybe you want to kind of like question students, maybe use this one as an example and be like, okay, so where do you see the primary colors? So how many times is yellow used? How many times is blue used? How many times is red used? Stuff like that. Maybe you could get them to look at their own artwork and notice like how many times they used yellow. Maybe if they're at tables, you could have them like work together and be like, okay, let's see like how different our artworks came out. So here are 2 artworks. Maybe, you know, we want to look, okay, this one only has yellow twice, whereas this one used yellow 3 times, but you both used red and blue the same times. And oh look, you have one more, this one has one more white space than this one. Kind of like get them to talk about art and like the differences, maybe what they like or don't like about it. I think art is something that is pretty hard for kids to talk about, and I mean not even just kids. I think everyone, if they aren't familiar with art, it can be very hard to talk about, and this could be a good way to get them started and a little bit more comfortable to talk about art, their art, other people's art. If you do this, really just remind them to be nice Everyone's artwork looks great. There's nothing wrong with it. People just do stuff differently, and that's okay. So I hope you've enjoyed this project. If you decide to teach it, please let me know how it went. Thank you for watching. This was Art with Miss Joyce.